Number 10, Texas, 7-2. At number 5, Georgia, 8-1. So Vegas has a line at -6. I have the line at -2.5, both favoring Georgia. And yes, I have a 4-point differential with Vegas. I do have Georgia favored within a field goal. This game's at 6:30, and I looked at this. And Texas is such a conundrum, right? And the way I have it phrased is at the beginning, I talked about this a little bit before, but at the beginning of the year, we watched Ohio State and Texas, and people were like, oh, they lost. The number 1 AP ranked team loses on the road to Ohio State under Matt Patricia's defense. Arch Manning looked like crap. You could tell from the first throw that his mechanics were off. You could tell from the rest of the game that he wasn't what was promised. And then they played like 3 or 4 FCS out of conference games and just kind of got to get their get back, it's essentially get their warm up. And still within those games, the offense was not as productive. They were still pretty lethargic. And I've used that word a lot to describe, slow tempo type offenses, the ones that are not really stretching the field. They're very methodical driven. And if you watch with the eye test, with Texas, I talked about earlier this week that they kind of play not to lose in terms of coordinating the offense. And people are like, oh, Sark needs to give up the play calling. And I'm like, no, that's not something that needs to happen. What is happening currently is, Sark's in practice every week watching Arch Manning. And I'd love to know the percentage of screen plays that they run. Bubbles, smokes, jailbreaks, running back, tight end screens, those types of things. I mean, they're all over the place in every matchup. And some of them hit, if you get good blocking on the perimeter, if you get at the right defensive matchup and call the right check of the line, and if that's something that happens, some of them hit, like we saw against Vanderbilt. But as I was saying, early in the year, offense very methodical, very lethargic, very slow. Defense played great, though, outside of the Florida game. Fast forward to the back half of the season, the offense all of a sudden starts to click. And that was after the Kentucky game. Kentucky offense looked the worst they've looked all year. In the Oklahoma game, offense did not look good at all. They did not. They took advantage of the turnovers that their defense forced. So we have very little data where the Texas offense really exploded. And that was Mississippi State and Vanderbilt. And it took them 3 quarters, essentially, for Texas to really kickstart their offense against Mississippi State, who has a terrible defense. And, they went in overtime. I think they have 2 overtime wins versus SEC teams this year, if the Mississippi State one was an OT. And so furthermore, I look at that and I say, look, Texas is such a conundrum to where we don't really know what we're going to see from this team. Was this? Yeah, it was in overtime. I just wanted to double check if I was right. Texas did win versus Mississippi State in overtime. I was like 99% sure, but I don't like being wrong. And so going into Georgia, that's another thing with Texas. On the road, they haven't been as impressive as they've been at home. They're a completely different team at home than they are on the road. They have not played a team on the road that has been in the conference. I'm not talking about Ohio State. In the conference, it has been as good as Georgia. And so again, slim data, very slim data. And so here's the tricky part that no one's going to predict, and it would be such a high risk, high reward if this isn't a knowing thing, but if you guessed it, you'd look like the biggest genius in the world. And that is, if Texas were to put the defense that they played with at the beginning of the year and matched it with the offense that they played against Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, they would win this football game versus Georgia. That is a high risk, high reward take. I'm not going to be bold enough to say that happens. I'm fine with saying that Georgia wins and then Texas surprises me, because then that creates so much more momentum for Texas heading into that rivalry game at the end of the year, right after Thanksgiving, versus Texas A&M at home, to which they are a much better team, like I mentioned before, at home. So